We now turn to looking at the Crito, which is a dialogue by Plato involving Socrates. The background from Socrates looked at before doesn't change. Still Socrates, still dead. Now, in the Crito, it takes place after his dialogue, the Apology. And in the Apology, Socrates is on trial, accused of various things such as corrupting the youth, being an atheist, believing in foreign gods, etc. And in the trial, Socrates is found guilty and sentenced to death. But, in a way, fortunately for Socrates, or perhaps unfortunately, the sort of practice of the city of Athens is that a ship is set out to commemorate the victory of Theseus over the Minotaur, and no executions can take place while the ship is still out at sea. And so Socrates, the ship is delayed by a storm, so Socrates still has time to engage in his philosophizing. Now in the Crito, his friend Crito and other friends have come to spring him out of jail. Nothing like dramatic, Mission Impossible type of stuff. They basically found a way to bribe the guards, and they'll spirit away Socrates to another city-state away from Athens. And so what Socrates does, given the chance to escape, he engages in a philosophical discussion of the key issues he sees it, which is this: is attempting to escape attempting an injustice? And Socrates believes yes. And he gives three arguments, two of which are general ones of obedience, and one of which is particular to him, in regards to why he should obey the state and remain. The first argument is essentially a combination of the benefit argument and the agreement argument. As Socrates sees it, the state benefited him. It brought him into the world, raised him, educated him, and gave him and every other citizen a share of all the good things it could. And, rather importantly, each citizen had the freedom to leave the city. If a man who was dissatisfied with the state, once they reached adulthood, and seeing how the laws are, could take his stuff and go, and be free to go. Now, as Socrates saw it, someone who remains, seeing how justice is administered and how the state is governed, agrees by the very fact of remaining there to do what the laws tell him. So his view basically is the state benefited him, and he had the freedom to leave, and by remaining, he agrees tacitly to obey the laws. So someone who disobeys acts unjustly on three counts. First, disobeys those who are his parents, disobeys those who reared him, and disobeys after agreeing to obey without persuading the state that they have done wrong. So his view is that the state benefited him, he was free to leave, and since he has remained, disobeying would be unjust on three counts. Now the second argument he gives is rather particular to Socrates, namely this: during his trial, he could have chosen to go into exile with the blessing of the state, rather than now escaping to exile without the blessing of the state. But he said during his trial that he was willing to die, and he preferred death to exile. Now, to try to escape now would be to not honor those words. He would not respect the laws because he would be trying to destroy them, trying to run away, and break the contracts and agreements that he made to live as a citizen. Now, this one, of course, is particular to Socrates, namely that he, in his trial, he chose death over exile, and now he would look, rather ridiculous, and more importantly for Socrates, he'd be breaking his agreements. Now, the third and final argument he presents is this, essentially an explicit presentation of the contract agreement. Socrates agreed, not in mere words, but by his actions, to live under the government of Athens, and he would be breaking his contracts and agreements with the state. Now, he puts in two important sort of exceptions. If someone is forced to hold to the agreements or contracts, or deceived, then the person is not obligated, on the grounds that, they were forced or deceived. But, Socrates claims, he was neither forced nor deceived by the state, and he was not, rushed. During his 70 years of life, he could have left any time during that, that time if he'd been dissatisfied with the laws or the agreement. But, as he says, he preferred neither Sparta nor Crete, nor any other state of the Greeks or barbarians, and he was satisfied with the state and its laws. and to now, to not abide by his agreements would look ridiculous. And so his three basic arguments are, first, the state benefited him, and since he was free to leave and chose to remain, it would be unjust to leave. The second argument is, he could have chosen exile during his trial, but he rather dramatically chose death over exile, and to leave now would of course make him look ridiculous, and also go back on his agreement. And thirdly, he has by his very actions shown that he accepts the government of Athens, and he was not led to this agreement by force or fraud, and he could have left at any time. Therefore, to break this agreement would break the contract, and it would be unjust. So Socrates sees that under those conditions, one is obligated to obey the state, even unto accepting execution. And that brings us to the end of our look at our good dead friend Socrates, arguing in the Crito for obedience. And next we'll turn to a slightly different viewpoint put forth by Henry David Thoreau, who was American and is also quite dead.